Hi. Well, after doing a whole recording, I realised I had no sound. So I'm going to have to do it again. Anyway, welcome to yet another video. Up a bit quicker than I thought, but I thought this a quick video to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of Linux would be quite good. So, without further ado, let's get to the advantages and disadvantages of Linux. Whoops, so there's a... Whoops, there we go. That's someone who isn't quite used to the equipment I'm using yet. Anyhow, the first one, which hasn't got a tick for some reason, I should have fixed it, I suppose, but I didn't. Low cost. It is extremely low cost. It's basically free to to download, to install on any hardware you want, however many times you want. There is absolutely nothing to pay. Linux is completely free of charge. And that probably is one of the most important things. It is free of charge. Secondly, stability. Linux is so stable. It is unbelievable how stable it can be. I've had two Raspberry Pis running Linux, well, Raspbian, for untouched, headless, for 3 years now. And I've never had to reboot them. They've never crashed. All I've had to do is install software updates. It never needs rebooting. It just carries on. The software that's running on it just runs perfectly. Never does a blue screen. Never just suddenly reboots or anything like that. Unlike Windows, certainly unlike Windows, which you come back to it and it's rebooted and you're like, or it crashes in the middle of something really important and you think, So that's the second thing, stability. The third one, we get back to the subject of free again. Free software, mostly. There are some proprietary software and drivers that you need to be aware of, but generally speaking, the software is free. Free. Free as in free of cost, free to distribute, and free as in open source free. So it's free for you to change, for you to distribute to whoever you want, for you to make copies of it, for you to look at the source code, change the source code, recompile the source code, do anything you want to it within the bounds of the GPL license. The next one, it runs on old hardware. You can easily find distros of Linux which run on 20-year-old computers. So if you've got that old laptop that you want to give to a kid or a relative, you can just slap a version of Linux on it, and certainly for everyday tasks, it will be no problem at all. It will give old hardware a completely new lease of life, and it is really something that we should embrace and stop chucking out all our hardware. You know, there's loads of hardware that I've chucked out in the past. There's absolutely no reason to, because it works perfectly, but it's not modern enough. So, you know, it's not cutting it. So it goes, where does it go? Oh, into the landfill. Security and privacy. Right, this is quite a big one as well. As well as free, security and privacy, in my view, are important. Security, as in, as far as I'm aware, there are no viruses and malware for Linux. There may be one or two, but there's so little that you have no need to run any type of virus, protection programming, or anything like that on a Linux system. There basically are no viruses for it. Also, unlike Windows, it doesn't collect data. The Linux operating system does not collect data for whoever companies to do what they want with your data. Your data is your data on Linux. You don't have to sign any weird ass ULAs or anything like that. It is privacy driven, and there are certainly distros of Linux that are completely private and will keep you completely locked down. Performance, well, that also goes with runs on old hardware. Linux on old hardware using the right distro can perform beautifully, far better than any version of Windows on that hardware. And even on modern hardware, Linux absolutely flies. It really does. There's no slowdowns, no jitteriness, nothing like that. It just flies. Flexibility. Linux is flexible. You can use it for whatever you want. It can be used as a server. It can be used as a TV box. It can be used as a full desktop. It can be used as a game machine. It can be used. There are versions of Linux and distros of Linux for everything that you want to do, which involves a computer in some way or other. It can be used in an embedded system, anything. It's also programmer friendly, which means Python is already installed in, as far as I'm aware, most versions of Linux, and certainly other computer languages are easily and freely available and easy to install if they're not already installed for Linux. And you can certainly find distros where a lot of languages have already been installed for you on first boot up. Customization. You can change your version of Linux to be anything you want. You can have a text-based only operating system. You can choose what desktop you want, whether you want a flash modern desktop or whether you want to go retro, the sort of Windows 95 style desktop. It's all there. And once you're in the desktop, you can then change how it looks, change the theme, change the colors, change how Windows react, change how programs react when they close, change the cursor, change everything. So even if you have a copy of Ubuntu, yours does not have to be the same as everyone else's. You can change it to be completely different. And more software updates. Linux won't leave you in the lurch. There are always going to be software updates, and if not, you just install the latest version and you carry on getting software updates. There's none of this, we have, 1 year and then you're stuck, and then you're going to be without software updates. No, because it's free, most companies have LTS, long-term support releases, and you can just update to the latest version if you so wish to. Now, I'll come on to the disadvantages of Linux. Whoops, those are still the advantages. Let's get on to the disadvantages. Here we go. It's a lot shorter, and it was a lot harder trying to work this out. Anyway, no standard version. There are about 5 or 6 what I call root distros of Linux. Debian, I don't know, Slackware, Red Hat, and so on and so forth. And after you've got those, each of those distros branches out into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different distros, and that's a problem. Which one do you want? You got to install hundreds of versions of Linux to find out which one you want. Which desktop do you want? There are then tens of desktops that you can install in Linux. It's great if you know what you're doing, but when you just come into Linux, it's like, oh my God, it's the supermarket conundrum, as I call it. There's just too much choice. And that also rolls into the learning curve. There's a big learning curve to Linux. There's no getting away from that fact. It's different than Windows or Mac. Its philosophy is different than Windows or Mac. And sometimes you need to get into the terminal and down onto the command prompt. Not all the times, and a lot of distros of Linux, you can do virtually everything on the desktop, but there will be some point where either some software can only be installed on the command line, or something goes wrong where the only way you can fix that, because you can't get to a desktop or there are no tools in a desktop, is to use the command line. And that frightens a lot of people. Doesn't frighten me. It doesn't frighten people who are already confident with computers. It doesn't frighten people who are used to the old-fashioned, text-based computer systems. But for a lot of people who just want to use a computer as a tool to get their work done, the idea of going into command line is just beyond belief. Equivalent programs. Now, there are equivalent programs for nearly, and I say nearly because not everything, but nearly everything, every program that's available for Windows or Mac, but not everything. And they're equivalent. They aren't the same programs. So you can't get Word, you can't get Excel, you can't get Photoshop, you can't get all those sorts of programs, which to a lot of people, that is a real deal breaker. GIMP may do the same as Photoshop, but it's not Photoshop. LibreOffice may do the same as Microsoft Office. It may be able to do everything exactly the same, but it isn't Microsoft Office. And to a lot of people, that's a problem. The next one is technical ability. You will need to go down onto the terminal sometimes, and you do need some sort of technical ability to even install Linux. Even though they're easier and easier with great graphical user interfaces, they don't come, basically, with a couple of exceptions, they don't come already installed onto computers. There can be issues with driver support, with hardware support for Linux, so you need a fair degree of technical ability to get the most out of it. You don't need a fair degree of technical ability to just do your day-to-day work on Ubuntu, as long as someone has set that up for you. Next, we come to compatibility. Even though Linux is one thing, Linux is one operating system, it's the Linux kernel. And everything on top of that can be different. And distributions are different. And their package managers are different. The way they install software is different. And some software may not be available for your distribution. That's why often I advise people to go with the really popular distributions like Ubuntu, because those are the ones that are most likely to have the packages for the software that you want. Of course, any software can be installed on any Linux system, but you would have to get the source code and then compile the source code for your system. And for 99% of people, they're just well out of the question. I mean, for 99% of very computer literate people, that is well out of the question. So certainly for your average consumer. Linking on support. There is no effing support. There may be forums, there may be loads of wikis, there may be loads of stuff online, which there is, and which I use, and which is great, but there is no support. And when you ask questions from the massive Linux community, most of them behave like complete tossers. Most of them, it's all, read the effing manual and all, you newbie, and you, the Linux community, behave like tossers to 99% of people. And lastly, games can be a problem. It's getting better, what with Steam now on Linux and more efforts being made. If you're a gamer, you've got to stick to Windows, really. That's all I can say, because the AAA games are going to be on Windows. Hopefully it gets better, like I say, with Steam and all those sorts of things. But at the moment, if you're going to be a real gamer, then I would say, unfortunately, install Windows. Anyway, we're back. So that was my quick advantages and disadvantages to running Linux. Hopefully you think I'm getting better at actually making these videos. I feel I'm getting a bit better. It was quite a struggle certainly the disadvantages, to work out the disadvantages. The advantages were pretty simple. It was a struggle to keep the number down, but the disadvantages is a struggle to get enough disadvantages to make a video. But the one thing that I will say is the biggest disadvantage is the support and the fact that the community are full of dicks. They really are. The Linux community is full of dickheads. And that won't make me popular, and you'll probably flame me down below, but I don't care, because it's true. And the sooner the Linux community realise that, the sooner that they'll do something about it. And then when newbies ask something, they won't say, just read the manual or anything like that. They will give answers to basic questions. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little video, and yeah, until the next time, hopefully subscribe. Remember to subscribe and tell people about this channel, and hopefully I'll see you on the next video. Until then,